Hello, I'm Bob the Booker and welcome to my channel. And today I just wanted to talk about the books that I've been reading this week. So let's get started talking about those. It's also threatening to rain again. So at some point the light may completely go as we're talking, but let's see. Anyway, let's get started. So first up, quite a few of these are relatively short books this week. The first being Orbital by Samantha Harvey. And this is a really quite interesting little book. It is sort of ostensibly about a group of characters who are in space, as the title and name might suggest. The sort of the front cover might suggest as well. But there's something really quite beautiful about it. We basically watch as these astronauts look out of the window and reflect on what they see, or they think about their lives back home, or they think about what sort of has been lost, or just sort of, it's quite dreamlike as a novel, with these really beautiful descriptions of what they can see or what they've been through or what's happening in their worlds. And it's sort of fascinating because it's, you know, obviously you get sort of sci-fi and other things that take place out in space, but sort of you don't often as much get the perspective of people who are just there in space floating, kind of thinking about what is coming next, and sort of space almost being sort of a backdrop more for the astronauts to sort of reflect on humanity and various other things. I just thought it was a really beautiful book and really sort of calm and it's sort of observational, and so there isn't a sort of a great deal of action of these big dramatic things. It's sort of lots of moments of noticing, of sort of spotting the little things happening around them, whilst also reflecting on the bigness of everything around them as well. So I just thought it was a really beautiful little novel that's just really well observed, I think. Next up, the International Booker Prize has now announced its winner of Kairos by Jenny Uppenbeck, and translated by Michael Hoffman. I kind of was just been finishing reading the long list, and so I read Veronica Raimo's Lost on Me, translated by, this is now where I can't find it, by Leah, Janeczko. And this I just thought was a really interesting book as well, and kind of one of those ones where I've seen a few people like it and kind of wish that it had made it to the shortlist, and I see why. Lost on Me is sort of mostly really sort of an autofiction book, really, I guess. You know, the character is called Veronica, and sort of wanders through bits of life, but there's something quite interesting about the way that it is sort of done. It's quite, again, almost quite dreamlike, quite sort of floating between scenes, where she is just born into this sort of family that sort of both seemingly very much understands her and also just does not at all. And so she sort of just floats, and she is kind of just trying to really escape what's kind of going on around her. She's this sort of, things get quite brutal and quite difficult towards the end of this book, but for most of it, there's this kind of almost dreamlike quality of just sort of floating through and kind of trying to understand who she is in the midst of everything else. And I just found it really quite interesting. I thought there's something just fun, and fun, maybe not the right word actually, given the plot in some ways. There's something really interesting about the way this book is done, and I really liked the point of view and the kind of the narrative style of it all. I thought it was very well observed. Again, it's a very observational week, apparently. Next up, some non-fiction. So first I read What Dementia Teaches Us About Love by Nicci, Gerard. And I think there's something, so she's a writer who writes very different books to this one often. I've not actually read any of them before. But this is her experience of sort of dealing with dementia in her family and with loved ones, but also sort of a wider attempt to understand dementia. And I just thought it was really beautifully put together, both in terms of sort of getting stories from various people and the ways that they have attempted to deal with dementia and with care and various other things. But there's something also just really quite special, I think, about the way that this book just approaches all of this with just utter love and attempts at compassion. It's such a difficult topic and such a difficult disease, and dementia is just this whole thing that is very difficult at times to sort of fully understand. And I think Nicci Gerard writes so powerfully here just about the little moments of care, of sort of how to, you know, make sure people have dignity and how to make sure people have what they need to really be able to kind of feel, you know, feel good. You know, she talks about how often there'll be sort of muscle memory or kind of other bits of memory unlocked that, you know, somebody who can't remember their own name or can't remember the names of those around them will hear the first few bars of a song and be able to play the rest on piano, or will sort of know dance steps that they learned 40 years ago. These sorts of the ways that the mind is just incredibly complicated around some of these things. I just thought it was really fascinating and just so well observed in this book, and so well captured. And it just really, you know, something I'm sort of dealing with in my own family. And there's something just really profound about the way this book leads with a lot of love and also just tries to understand it without a sense of pity. You know, it's not looking at people going through dementia as being less than. It, in fact, kind of challenges some of the ways that we talk about it. And sort of, yeah, I just thought it was really well done, and just a really human, really beautiful book. And last but not least, Disability Intimacy by Alice Wong. Well, it's a collection of essays that Alice Wong has curated. I mean, she's a really interesting writer anyway, particularly around disability, and particularly how she writes about so many things. And so here she's sort of gathered together lots of people to write essays about disability, and particularly disability through the lens of intimacy and relationships and all those sorts of things. So, for example, you've got these fascinating essays in here about people's relationships with their carers. So actually what is in theory, you know, somebody and their carer, and this could be a very transactional relationship of, I need you to do X, Y, Z to help me to live a certain kind of life. The book has essays that talk about the various ways that a really good carer can turn that into much more. It's not necessarily a friendship or a relationship in a traditional sense, but it's a way where they can really deeply understand each other. And there's something about again, kind of thinking about Nicci Gerard's book as well, the ways that we can restore dignity to people, because, you know, just because somebody is disabled or doesn't have capacity in some other form doesn't mean that, you know, they don't appreciate, for example, a certain type of conversation or sort of touch or whatever else. And I just think this is a really well curated set of essays, because you've got some really fascinating ones about intersections with various identities. And so, you know, for example, about disabled people of colour, or disabled people who are also LGBTQIA plus, or various other kind of intersections with people's lives. And I think this book does a really good job of sort of building a bigger picture of the various things that otherwise probably go relatively unspoken about how, you know, somebody might need, you know, I don't know, even sort of hugs or dancing or whatever else, and something that kind of connects them to other people, and helps them have this sort of sense of intimacy and closeness with somebody, particularly in a culture where often disabled people can be treated as sort of an other. And so I think it just it's really interesting, and kind of challenged a few sort of thoughts, or expanded a few thoughts I had in a really interesting way. And I think it's just very, very well done. So those are the books I read this week. And I'm going to be away now for a week on holiday. So when I am back, I'll continue on with weekly reads, but there'll be something else instead of the weekly reads next Sunday. Yeah, so I will disappear for a little bit. I'll see you back on the other side. There'll still be videos scheduled and everything, and I'll still be around online, but I'll sort of not be recording anything for a week or so. Anyway, take care, have a wonderful week, and I hope you are all doing very, very well. Bye bye.